This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Lamid. Baruch Hashem, a month into this incredible Masechta. I apologize, we did have fallen a half a day behind. Psiyata de Shemaya will be back up to date within a day or so. I mean, we'll be up to date, but we'll be ahead like we've been trying to do. We pick it up from Chavtes Amid Beis. Chavtes Amid Beis were 2 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara, Umei Divrei Rav Elazar. So Divrei Rav Elazar, we're in the middle of a discussion. What happens in a scenario that there's hezek from an item which does not have an owner? Rav Elazar was of the opinion that said chayiv. Umei Divrei Rav Elazar mer chayiv is medayik the Gemara. For the fact that Rav Elazar says chayiv, Rav Yochanan Omar Potter. Must be Rav Yochanan says Potter. So now we're not going to ask on the root din of Rav Elazar, but we're going to ask on the diuk. Asks the Gemara, is this so? Umi Amar Rav Yochanan hachi. Does Rav Yochanan really hold this, that there's a patur for an item which has no owner, a mafkir nechasav? V'atinan, on the first white line we learned in a Mishnah, hamatzniya es hakoitz, vezas chuches. Someone hides his glass shards, his thorns, or a piece of, or just those 2 items, excuse me. Or one makes a fence out of thorns. Or a geder, a fence that falls into Rishus Harabim. And in all of these scenarios, and someone else gets damaged. What is the halacha? Chayiv bin Izkoi, says the Tanakama. Rav Yochanan explains Rav Yochanan Loishanu ala b'mafriach avol b'mitzamseim. Then you're going to be potter. Explains Rav Yochanan that this din, this chiyuv is only b'mafriach, is only where the thorns were facing outwards. Avol mitzamseim, but if the thorns were confined into his own property, then potter, then he is potter. Says the Gemara, why is this true? Mitzamseim amai taima potter. In a case of tzimtzum, in a case where the thorns are not protruding outward, what is the reason that Rav Yochanan exempts from damages? Lav mishom, 4th wide line, says the Gemara, davle bar bershusay. Is it not because Rav Yochanan is of the opinion that such a case is considered a bar in his own rishos? Mechlal, and therefore from there we can infer the chiyuva debar bershos harabim hu, that the only time there's a chiyuv of bar is rishos harabim. Alma, says the Gemara. So what do we see from over here? So again, Rav Yochanan said a din about matzniya kois chuches. Rav Yochanan said a din about making a fence out of thorns. We're medayik that din that it's only in a case of tzimtzum is there a p'tur. But if it's not tzimtzum, and the reason is why? Because it's bershusay lemaisa. But says the Gemara, if it's not bershusay, then it's going to be chayif. And from here, says the Gemara, we could see that what? We could see that mafkir nechasav, if someone makes ownerless his items, then chayif. Not like we were just medayik shitas Rav Yochanan. Says the Gemara, no, right? Really, it's potter as well. So mitzam say my time a potter. Sham the itmar Allah for a different reason, because we learned on it. Amar Ravacha Breder Ravika. You know why? Levishain darka and shel b'nei adam lehischachech b'ksalim. You're a potter because as long as the thorns are not protruding outward, as long as they're on their property borders, you're a potter. Why? Because it's not the derech. People don't usually go and rub up against the wall. So you had no reason to anticipate someone doing such. And therefore that is the reason why you are a potter. So the Gemara had a kasha on Rav Yochanan, the Gemara defends. Continues the Gemara, Rav Yochanan, one more time, does Rav Yochanan really say this? 3 lines to the bottom of Chavtas Abeis, Rav Yochanan. But Rav Yochanan has taught halacha kistam Mishnah. Rav Yochanan says we pass like a stam Mishnah. Utinan, and we have a stam Mishnah that teaches ha chayfer bar b'shas harabim v'nafal l'teicha yishar chamar umeis. So digs a pin in Rishus Harabim and an ox or a donkey falls in and dies. Chayiv. You are chayiv. So says the Gemara, what is the reason? The reason is because the same deal. Because it's Rosh Hashanah. But Rav Yechon would clearly hold that if it was ownerless, it would be Potter. And this is a Stam Mishnah, which Rav Yechon says we baskin like. So says the Gemara, how could we be medayik that Rav Yechon holds on Afker Nechas of his Potter? Says the Gemara in the last line, you're right. So now we're going to flip the table. Rav Yechon says Chayiv, and therefore Rav Yechon says Chayiv, and Rav Yechon Amar Chayiv, Rav Lazar Amar Potter. Ask the Gemara now on Rav Lazar, V'amar Rav Lazar, Misham Rav Yishmael. As we turn over to Lamed Avon Aleph V'chulu, but Rav Lazar said explicitly that what is the halacha of Shnei Dvarim? She'einon b'rshusei shel Adam, v'asan hakasav kiluim b'rshusei chametz. So clearly Rav Lazar is of the opinion that we're medayik. Rav Lazar says Potter. Rav Lazar is of the opinion that the Torah asan b'rshusei they are going to be chayiv. Says the Gemara, the classical teretz lo kasha lo didei ha dirabei. Don't ask on Rav Elazar. One is he and one is his Rebbe. And now we have a new Mishnah on Lamed Amud Aleph. Continues the Gemara with Hezik Bershos Harab. Says the Mishnah, Ashayfech Mayim Bershos Harab. Someone poured water into Rosh Hashanah, Vuzik Banacher, and someone else is damaged, Chayiv and Isko, you are obligated. Case number 2, this hopefully should sound familiar. We had it a few moments ago. Hamatzniya Zakaitz, if someone hides his kites, his thorn, Vezazchuches, or his glass shards, or Vagoider as Gidroi Bekaitz, if someone creates a fence with thorns, Vegeder Shanav L'Shasarabim, or one's fence falls into Shasarabim, Vuzik and Acher, what is the halacha? Chayiv b'niskan. So 2 halves of the Mishnah, both of them are chayiv. Part A is you pour your water into Shazarabim, and part B is your glass, your shards, your thorns, your fence damage. Says the Gemara, what is the first din in the Mishnah? The first din that one pours mayim in Shazarabim amarav. This din in the Mishnah is only laishanu ela dinitfu kelav b'mayim. Avalhu atzma yipater. We had this recently. Why? Karka oilam hezikasai. If he falls and his kelim, his utensils, his clothing gets damaged, then eina chanami. That's the case. You're chayiv. However, if he slips and he gets injured by the ground, damaged in English, then you are pater. Why? Karka oilam hezikasai. It's considered the ground damaged him. Din of Rav explaining our Mishnah. Amar le Ravuna comes along Ravuna and he asks, 3 lines into the Gemara le Rav, Lo ela ki Rav Shai. It should be no less than his refesh, his mud. And when the water gets mixed with the ground, it creates mud, and it's his mud now that's damaging him, even when he slips and falls. Says the Gemara, Mi savris lo tamu maya, but the tamu maya. The case is that the water dried up, and that is the reason why he is no longer chayiv if the ground damages. Vetarti lamali asked the Gemara, why do we need to say the same din twice? You just had this on Daf Chav Ches. Says the Gemara, fundamentally, chadi b'mosachama, v'chada b'mosach. What is in the summer? What is in the winter? The Tanya, as we learned in our Brisa, kol elu sha'amru paiskim b'baiseim v'garvim ha'reiseim. All these times that one is allowed to be opening their waste pipes and shovel out their garbage, their septic pits is you don't have any rishos in the summer, but in the summer you have no rishos. Why? Because all the roads are dry. But in the winter, it rains. There was no proper roads. The roads are anyways dirty. Therefore, you're allowed to empty out your sewage and your septic pits, your garbage into the street. But says the Gemara, even though in the winter you have rishos, imhezika is still chayiv l'shalim. And that's going to be the chiddush. The chiddush is that even though one has permission, one is allowed to empty out his water situations into the street. However, says the Gemara, that's not going to exempt you if it damages. Continues the Gemara, the 2 dots, about 12 lines down. Is the second part of the Mishnah, which really we started with today. Amar Rav Yochanan teaches Rav Yochanan Lashon al Mafriach. This hopefully sound familiar. We had this moments ago. It says only if the thorns are sticking into the street, but if they're equal with your property, loy. My time potter. What is the reason for this din of Rav Yochanan? And in such a scenario, you're going to be potter. Amar Ravacha Breid Ravika. You know why? If you change darkish b'nei Adam, this chachech b'ksalim, which of course was the maskana that we had a few moments ago. Tanu Rabbanan continues the Gemara quoting a brayso. Hamatzniya koitzaisav zechluchaisav l'teikaisav shechaveiro. So one hides thorns, glass shards in the fence of his friend Ubaba al Kaisel. And the owner of the wall, unbeknownst to him, comes and Visasar as Kaisel, he knows that he breaks down his wall. He doesn't know there's glass and other items hidden in the wall. The one that hid the items, he is obligated. On this again, Amar Rav Yochanan Loishanu, this sin is only true. Ella beKaisel ru'uya. A weak wall. Why? Because if the wall was weak, then when you hid your thorns, your glass there, you should have anticipated perhaps the owner is going to knock it down. Avul beKaisel bari, then amatzniya pater v'chayev bal ha-kaisel. The bal ha-kaisel is going to be chayev, because when the items fall, he should ensure they don't do any damage. Amar Ravina, and this comes from Ravina, and he qualifies further. Zoisai meres, you know, we learn out from here the similar case. Someone covers up his pit with the lid, with the cover of his friend. Ubal bal dali, and the owner of the lid, the pit, the cover comes, and he takes his cover. Chayev balabar, the one that dug the pit, the one who's owner of the pit, he's chayev. Says the Gemara, what's the chiddush? Pshita, of course, and explains the Gemara like we just said. Ma'u detema. He didn't know anyone to tell in the case of the wall. But in this case, I apologize, our video has slowed down again. And therefore, Kamash Malan, the chiddush is that even in this case, the Baal Habar is going to be chayiv. Taner Rabbanan, and we conclude. We'll call this part B of today's shir. Chasidim Arishonim. They would hide their thorns and glass in their fields, and Mambikim them Gimel Tfachim, they would dig 3 Tfachim deep and bury it there. Why? So that the plowshare does not get stuck and damaged by their items, being careful for even any potential damage. Rav Sheishas Shadle Benura, you would throw these items into a fire. Rava Shadle Bediglas, Rava would throw them into the Tigris, into the river. Amar Rav Yehuda Haiman Debaylam Evi Chasida Lekayim Mili Dinizakin. We're learning here Nizakin. One might wonder, what Nizakim? Is it so chashiv? You want to be a chasid? Learn Nizikin. Rav Amar Mili Da'ava is Amri La, and some say Mili De Brachais. We continue with the Mishnah, about 20 lines from the bottom of Lamid Amid Aleph. Says the Mishnah, Moiti has Tav Noivi Kasher Shazarabim. So when he brings out his straw and his other types of straw, processed and unprocessed straw, in order to turn it into manure. And Vuzik Ben Acher, someone else got damaged. What's the halacha? Chayev Ben Isko, you're obligated. What are you doing leaving your straw in the middle of the street? And anyone who comes is allowed to take them. Rashba Goimer, call him a kalgum just around his zika the chayev l'shalim. I call them zacha. However, as I call someone to over manure, just around Vuzik Ben Acher, chayev be niskoim. So says the Gemara, the first part of the Mishnah taught if you put your straw in the street, someone else gets damaged, you are chayiv. Says the Gemara in classical sense, figuring out who is the Tana of the Mishnah. Lema mas nisan. Let us suggest that the Tana of the Mishnah, I'll tell you who it's not, says the Gemara. Is the loik Rabbi Yehuda? Is not Rabbi Yehuda the Tana of the Brayso? Rabbi Yehuda imer b'shazaytzah. At the time of taking out the zevel, that is when one is allowed to take his zevel as fertilizer to shesrabim v'saybra and pile it up kol shloshim yom kidei she'nishav beragle adam uberagle behema, so that it could be trampled on by the feet of people and animals. Shamanas kein henchel Yeshua says aretz. What do we see clearly? We see Rabbi clearly only allows one to leave his manure as fertilizer in the street. That's not like our Mishnah. Because our Mishnah said what? Our Mishnah said if you damage, you're chayiv. Clearly, you're not allowed to leave it out in the street. Says the Gemara, no, if you look at Rav Yehuda, our Mishnah can even be Rav Yehuda. 3 lines to the wide lines, you know why? Maida Rav Yehuda Shem Hezik. Mishalem ma shehezik. Rav Yehuda says you're allowed to do it, but if it damages, you still have to pay. V'atanan asking about Rav Yehuda, Imer b'ner Chanukah b'ater b'nei b'ershos. Chanukah, within the week of Chanukah, beautiful. Chanukah, you're butter. Why? Because of Chanukah, you have rishos. Ma'elam mishum rishos bazdin. Says the Gemara, Loi mishum rishos mitzvah. Tani Rav Yehuda, Imer teaches Rav Yehuda b'ner Chanukah b'ater b'nei shehu rishos mitzvah. So the Gemara is sticking that it could potentially be Rav Yehuda be the Tana of our Mishnah. And Rav Yehuda is going to be the one that's going to be make you chayiv, even though you're allowed to put it there. Tashema says the Gemara 3 lines in the bottom. Kolelu sha'amru, all these times that we said, mutarim lekalku rishos rabim memzik chay l'shalim. Rav Yehuda baiter. Rav Yehuda is clearly the one that disagrees, and Rav Yehuda is the one that says that in hizik, if you put it there, you're baiter. Amar Rav Nachman, Mas Nisan Shloi B'Shas, Oitzah Asvalim Rav Yehuda. You're right. Rav Yehuda holds in such a scenario you're chayiv. But comes like Rav Nachman, he can say, you know why our Mishnah could be Rav Yehuda? Because the reason is because in our Mishnah, it's not at the time of taking out the zevel. When did Rav Yehuda allow you to bring out the manure? When it's the right time. Our Mishnah is talking about when it's not the right time. Rav Ashi Amar says, Rav Ashi, as we turn over to Lamed Amebei, is the second way of reconciling Shitas Rav Yehuda and the Mishnah. Tavnoi v'kashay tanan mishom de misriki. Rav Yehuda said a case of zevel. Our Mishnah did not say zevel. What did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said a case of straw. The din of straw was precise. Why? Because straw is slippery, and that's the reason why you're chayiv in such a case, even though Rav Yehuda would hold your potter in the case of zevel. We continue on the top line of Laman Amebei's Kol HaKolim Em Zacha. Amarav Bein Begufan Bein Bishvachan. Uziyam Ar Bishvachan Avalo Begufan. So we have a machlokes. And these scenarios when one leaves his item out in the middle of the street and someone else is allowed to go take them, what are they allowed to take? Are they only allowed to take the improvement, but not the item itself? Meaning, they put out straw, the straw over time turns into fertilizer, into manure, compost. Can they only take that? Says Ziri, or Rav says, no, you can even take the item itself. 4 lines down suggests the Gemara, what is this mach loikes? Rav savar konsu gufan mishum shvachan. Rav says, we have a kinas. What are you doing? Putting yourself in the middle of the street, and therefore, not only do you lose the shvach, you lose the item itself. Uziria savar loy konsu gufan mishum shvachan. If you only lose that which the item improves, but not the item itself. Says the Gemara Tanan, that says a kasha on Rav. Rav that said that there's a knas. Said our Mishnah, you turned over manure in Rosh Hashanah, and then someone else got damaged. What's the halacha? Said our Mishnah, chayiv in iskai. But the Mishnah never said anyone can take it. Seemingly, why? Because you can't take the item itself. Kasha on Rav. Says Gemara, no kasha. Tana the reisha v'adin the seifa. No, it's the same din reisha and seifa. Ay v'tani Allah asur mishum gezel. But we have a brisa that says asur mishum gezel, seemingly pointing out explicitly that you can't take the item itself. Says the Gemara, kikatani asur mishum gezel. Akula mas nisan kai. It's going on the whole Mishnah, both the case of the straw and the case of the dung, but. And the one who takes it, he has acquired it. Says the Brisa, if you take from him, it's gazel, not the item itself. You can't take it. Hafach. If someone takes it and you go take it back, then it's gazel. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Look at Ani Achi. Doesn't say this to Tanan. What do the Mishnah say? What do the Brisa say? Excuse me. What's the halacha? Chayiv in iskai. Who could take it? Umoter mishum gazel, and it says explicitly there's no issue of gazel. So the Brisa says explicitly, not like the way that we just wanted to explain. So how are we going to answer? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. What's your whole kasha? Which I'm sure is probably something that bothered people as we were reading. We're talking about an item that gets improved. Galal manure doesn't get improved. It is itself. Davar sheish boy shevach shvach. So then improves. Then katsu gufa mishum shvacha. That's Rav's din. Davar shein boy shevach like galal loy kansu. So we thought we had a kash and Rav, and the Gemara deflects. Continues the Gemara. Yibai Elohu asks the Gemara l'divrei oimer kansu gufa mishum shvacha. And according to Rav, that there is indeed a kenas. Asks the Gemara la'alter kansinan. At what point is there a kanas that you can't take the item itself? Is it only once the item improves or right away? Tashma says from the fact that the Mishnah said a case of galal, gold does not improve. And we saw that we had a kasha, that galal was a kasha and Rav. So what does that mean? That means that if in galal there's going to be a kanas always, seemingly there'll be a kanas even before something improves. Says the Gemara, "V'tizbra ki arina galal makmi delishni." When do we talk about a case of galal makmi delishni Rav Nachman? That was before the top of our Amid when Rav Nachman explained the chilik l'bas l'shani Rav Nachman. Mikol emir mikol. We never had klal. We never had a kasha. The whole kasha was wrong, so you can't bring me a raya from there. And we end off today's shir 7 lines from the wide lines. Says the Gemara, lema kita noi. Let's say that there's machlekes, Rav and Zeiri. There's machlekes in the top of the Gemara, whether there's a kenas of gufan atu shvachan. Let's say that this is a machlekes tanoim. As we quote, "Shtar shekazva ribis yivashtar," that ribis was written in Tei Koinsin Isai. Veino goyve, you're not like kedeklo, it's clever, it's the ribis divi ramir v'chama imrim. No, goyve es agarin avoloi. Goyve es a ribis. Says the Gemara. Sounds very similar to our case. Leimarav damakar amir, that there's going to be a kanas of the item itself because of the shvach. Uzimi amar kira banan. And Ziri says like the rabbanan. So suggests the Gemara that the same machlekes by us is the machlekes that we see by ribis. Amar lecha Rav will answer no. No damir fil rabbanan. And can the rabbanan also when the rabbanan says din over there by ribis el de bekeren de hatira. Over there's no problem lending the actual money itself. But in our case, carrying gufa kamazik. In our case, you're leaving your straw in the middle of the street. The karen is the item that is damaging, and therefore, that's why else is a kenas. Uziri on the first white line, and Adami I feel the karen mayor. Why? And can the karen mayor also when the mayor says the eladim mishas ksiva the ovle shuma. When it comes to rivers, at the moment that you wrote up the star, you made an evaluation. There's already an isser. In our case, miyemer demazik, who said there's ever going to be any damages, and therefore says the Gemara, this can't be the same machlekes. And the Gemara tries once again on the third wide line, lema kahani tanai. Okay, so let's say the machlekes Rav and Ziri is like the following tanaim. But who's the Gemanach? You take out your straw to create into fertilizer and tongue gets damaged. Chayav in this gazel. Rashbag Oimer Kol Mekaglim just Rav Mezikin Chayav L'Shalom Chol Kodem Zacha Umutarim Mishum Gazel. So before we get to figure out what's this Rav and Ziri, he says Maragufa Kasha. One second, there's a problem inherently. It can't be. It says you're allowed to take it, then it says it's Gazel. But Mishum Gazel Agufan, and then also Rashbag Lemimar Afilu Gufan Nami. So says the Gemara, the same machlekes Tanakama and Rashbag will be the machlekes Rav and Zeiri. And we conclude with the Gemara saying 4 lines from the bottom. L'Zeiri, you're right. Vade Tanahi, the Rav, Milema Tanahi, Amrulcha Rav could explain that only by us there is this kenas. The Kulei Alma Katziguva Misham Shvachan. So what's going on over there in the machlekes Rashbag and Tanakama Vacha Ba'alacha Vein Mayrin King Kamiflagi? It's a different machlekes. We're going to stop over here as this will get us into a new topic. V'siyata Dishmaya.